Hello, welcome back to our class. We are still on the module 3, Design for Future Needs. So in this class we are going to discuss about design research. We just seen about it in the previous class, but we will see now more details such as the methods that we can use for building empathy in design. That's very important, as you know. We're gonna see what methods or techniques we can use to identify needs, and also we're gonna learn how to develop surveys and interviews that are very important when you are trying to discover one specific problem or understand more about the problem. And also I'll show you some methods that we can use for prototyping. Empathy. In our first part of the class, we're gonna see about empathy in design research. So what is empathy? According to the Cambridge Dictionary, empathy is the ability to share someone else's feeling or experiences by imagining what it would be like to be in that person's situation. So empathy is our ability to see the world through other people's eyes, to see what they see, to feel what they feel, and experience things as they do. One of the most important skills that we can develop in our context of design here is empathy. So all we're gonna do now is working towards building empathy and understand more about our users. Uh, Although it's a personal skill, we have some techniques that we can use to help us connect with people in a way that we can have more empathy with them. So the first of them is the beginner's mindset. In order to empathize with other peoples, we should try to adopt a mindset of a beginner and avoid carry any beliefs or assumptions that we may have. So because these assumptions only make sense in our context, but don't make sense on their context. So that's why you should have a beginner's mindset on that. So we can also use a technique called what, how, and why. So always ask these questions to help move from observations to understand a little bit more about what is behind the actions you observe. What is driving that person to do what she is doing at the moment. So by asking what, you figure out what has happened or what has been done. You ask how, you analyze how the person is doing what she's doing. How does she perform the task? And when you ask why, you try to create some alternatives, guesses, or you try to think why the person is doing that regard the person's motivations and also emotions. So we kind of educatedly or politely guess why she is doing that. So we imagine some alternatives. This way we can be more empathetic with the person that is on the other side. Also, another technique that's very good that we can have at hand is the one-on-one interviews. Interviews can be a productive way to connect with real people and gain insights. Talking directly to people you are designing for may be the best way to understand their needs, hopes, desires, and also their goals. Interviews are generally structured, and interviewers will typically have a set of questions they wish to ask to their interviewees. So, these interviews offer the personal intimacy and directness of other observations methods, while allow you to be face to face to the person to ask questions, and it is very useful when we use that on the design thinking process, especially when we are using that on the discovery phase. We'll see more about that later on. But before doing an interview, most of the work happens before that. So we need we need first brainstorm some questions, to generate questions, to understand what we are achieving, and also what we want to learn about that interview or about that person, about that the problem that we are trying to deal with. And another method here is the active listening. Your ability to listening or to give your undivided attention to the person on the other side. It's very, very, very helpful when we are building empathy, because we can listen to someone else. We try to figure out what's happening on their shoes. So that's why we can build empathy using these techniques. And there's a quote that I always like to say, that good designers are good listeners. They start by understanding, not solving. Eh, It's a quote that I found once on the internet. I don't remember the who said that now, but I'll try to find out and then also give it that to you. More here. Um, how many of you remember about the Google Glass? Google Glass was very high-tech glasses, as this one that you are seeing on the picture now, used by Sergey Brin now here on the picture. So you use that glass and you have a tiny screen attached to it, so you could ask some questions like uh, like a personal assistant, like, okay Google, what's the weather in this region that I'm now, or okay Google, start recording. And the glass also had a camera, so it's a very high-tech gadget, but it didn't succeed. I got a quote here from the MIT Tech Review, important magazine that shows about technology, design, and business. And the quote had, Glass annoyed other people largely because of its lack of utility. No one could understand why you would want to have that thing on your face in the way of normal social interaction. So, although it was a groundbreaking high tech device, it seems to fail to identify the user's actual needs. It's lacked in empathy, mainly, to identify the social context it would be used, to identify how people would interact with it. So, considering that it was a voice activated device, it's not socially accepted to say commands to your device on the streets, or it would create um, at minimum awkward situation. So, it failed mainly because of the lack of empathy. When you build empathy at the beginning of your project or of your research, you can have some alternatives in your mind and identify how people will use that, or how people will interact with what you are proposing. So the next part here is the user research. As we've seen already, user research is the systematic study of the goals, needs, and capabilities of users, so as to specify the design, construction, or improvement of tools to benefit how users work and live. So how can we better understand the audience we are building something for? We can rely on user research methods. This way we can focus on the problem we are solving and not on the solution we will build. Because we are not sure if that solution that we've imagined will be the right one to solve the problem. Like the Google Glass we just seen now. So design research, when we talk about design research, um, it's very important to remember of designing the right thing uh, before design the thing right. So let's move on here. Um, I guess you remember about this chart that I've showed in the previous class as well. This chart organizes the user research methods between among these different quadrants. So we use these methods to capture data in different phases of of a design project that we are working on. So here we will see behavior versus attitudinal. So behavioral methods will allow you to identify behaviors and how people use or interact with something. Attitudinal methods will will allow you to identify how people think or how people talk about the thing that or the problem that you are researching about. And also it's organized about uh, on the x-axis between qualitative and quantitative data. So you can have more qualitative data when you are performing an interview. On the other hand, you can have quantitative data when are you are running a survey, for example. Uh, if we start a project using the same approach that we've seen in the previous classes, such as the double diamond here, we should start by the problem. So we need to understand more about the problem. We're not looking for a solution right now, but we need to clearly understand the problem before building the solution. So we can use these methods that I've mentioned, such as surveys and in interviews on this phase of the project. We are still discovering more about it. Yeah, so not only surveys and interviews, but we can also use um, desk research. Is I'll show you what it is in a second. Just a second. So moving on. User research data collection can be divided in two kinds of research. Different these two different kinds of research when we perform a design research or user research. The first one is the primary research that relies on primary data collection. It means you need to go on field or talk to people and collect data at the source. On the other hand, we have here the secondary research, also known as desk research, and the goal is to collect data from already existing researches. So you are getting a secondary data, not the primary data. You are not going to the source of the data. You are not talking to people, but you are uh, reviewing or getting data from already existing research or already existing databases. It is cost effective and help you better understand the problem before tackling it or handling it. Uh, how we do a desk research? The goal of a desk research is to review previous findings to gain a broad understanding of the field you are going to deal with. So desk research, as we've seen, is another name for secondary research. Your role here as a designer um, performing desk research is to review previous findings and previous works and to get a better understanding about the problem, the general problem and the general context that you are going to work with. I'll show here a, a good structure or a structure for a good desk research. And the first thing that good desk research has is the objective. So you should have a clear objective before starting your research process. It will allow you to define where you want to go, and you know also when you've reached your goal. Um, you can set a number, for example. You can say that you will collect 10 articles and or you gonna read 20 previous research, or also you can have a hypothesis, and when you can deny or invalidate that hypothesis, and you will know that you've reached your goal. Also, you can have a deadline. It will help you to not work on that endlessly. So you need to have a realistic deadline, so you can define a time frame. And once you start digging into a topic, you it will pop up a lot of new findings and new researches, so you need to know when to stop. And also the research process itself. So of course it depends on the context, it depends on the subject and the complexity of the subject, and also your previous knowledge about the topic that you are going to research. But you can find relevant websites, relevant authors and opinion leaders. And also you can use some techniques like such as combining different keywords on Google search or other search engines, using also Google Scholar, that is a source of academic papers and articles. And at the end you have the analysis phase. When you are on the analysis phase, you better have all the articles, materials, and items that you've collected at one place. So this way you can distill them and you can read all of them and interpret this data and take your notes on that. For that, you can use some online tools such as Notion or Google Docs. I've separated here some sources that you can use when you are on the research phase. The one that I mentioned, Google Scholar, it's a search engine for academic articles. You can use Forbes website; it's a very well known magazine. Harvard Business Review, a really good magazine as well. Gartner and Forrester, that are two research agencies that always show the state of the art of technology and how a market, how some technologies are entering the market as well. And also you can find really good material on MIT Technology Review. And here I have some suggestions when you are putting together all the results or you are compiling the results. You can use Google Docs, Notion, Miro, uh, some Word document, or also another interesting alternative here is the Rowan Research. It has an interesting approach because it allows you to interconnect different documents, so you can have a network of concepts with everything that you've researched about. So I guess that you now able to start your own desk research. You can follow the structure that I've mentioned. You can use some of these tools and sources that I've also suggested. See you in the next class.